what's it about? It's really about retooling human beings who don't have work, right? The fourth industrial revolution technologies are going to make us obsolete. You don't need human workers when you have algorithms and robots, which are far less risky for corporations than actual human beings. You have to do something to kind of keep the money flowing if you want growth. And what do? You build an entire industry of changing human beings and getting new behavioral outcomes through professional development, sensitivity training, new little 6-week courses where you get a badge and you do what? You prove your value as a human being so that you can have access to privileges, either employment or, travel or whatever it is. And so this is a huge industry, and it's very powerful, and they, like I say, they use the same words over and over again. So to me, it really does look like a kind of really brainwashing. You're just hearing this over and over, and decent people are fooled by it.
Hi, this is Jill Varvel with the DixieCast podcast. This week, I had the privilege of traveling to Jenks, Oklahoma, to record a presentation featuring Dr. Julianne Romanello. You may recall from a prior DixieCast episode where I highlighted some of her work. Dr. Julianne Romanello is a former professor from the University of Tulsa who left her post to research and educate the public on the dangers of smart cities and sustainable development. After her university was restructured by local industrialists who redirected the school's focus from the liberal arts to applied technology, Julianne embarked on a life-changing investigation into the role of public-private partnerships and their corrosive effect on governments and civil liberties. As a mother of 4 young children, Julianne became concerned with the deceptive marketing of these projects and their sponsorship by powerful private companies. Her work tracks trends in surveillance, finance, big data, education, healthcare, transportation, and the transnational non-governmental organization and advocacy groups piloting programs in these spaces. So join me as I feature highlights of her presentation and conclude with a 10-minute interview of Julianne herself.
I like to remind people that all of these words have gone through many focus groups. They have been tested for decades to see what words are going to be most effective in sort of appealing to the broadest group of people possible without cluing them in to the actual program that's going on. So huge marketing studies and focus groups have gone into deceiving leaders, the general public, and I think we have heard these terms over and over and over again, so we don't even think about them. Here are my top 10 buzzwords. Sustainable, resilient, equity, inclusive, innovative, collaboration, transparency / accountability, diversity, leadership, and impact. If you just know those 10, and you know what they actually mean, you can just start searching for things. Impact Report Tulsa. Every corporation has an impact report. Every philanthropy, every charity has an impact report. What is that? That's that measurable change that is going to become the basis of the new international economic order. So the new currency of the Build Back Better economy, or the Great Reset, is impact. How have we changed one thing for the better? Now, who defines what's better? Right now, it is looking like the UN Sustainable Development Goals are defining better. But, it could swing the other way. And we really have to be wary of when it does swing the other way, because you're still trading in these behavioral outcomes, and you have people who have selected what's good, what needs to be prioritized without consulting voters, without respecting the First Amendment and freedom of speech in the press and things like that. If you follow the buzzwords, you will be able to identify any New World Order program out there because they all use the same language. And so you will be empowered to say, oh, nope, see you later, not this one, not this one, not this one. And it's very easy to identify those, but once you see it, but until you do, I think it has been designed to trick people, and it works, unfortunately. So economic growth is one thing that they're going to put a priority on. That's the reward. Then there's a risk that they want to prevent, and that is you want to prevent economic inequality and prevent social instability. So the Sustainable Development Program is going to promote things like public services, health, affordable housing, walkability, education, all these things that you're seeing roll out in every city plan out there. Those are to prevent the inequality that might lead to social instability. In other words, you want to placate the people so that they don't rise up and call you to task for selling out our republic. Okay, that's what they're doing. And they're going to promote these new markets, but they're all basically in 4IR, Fourth Industrial Revolution sectors. So very high tech. It's, kids are going to be coding, they're going to be working on blockchain, metaverse stuff. Where is the real production of goods and services that we can touch and feel and be with other human beings? That's gone. Okay, because what sustainable development wants to do is limit our use of natural resources, so it wants to move everything into the virtual world. I mean, really, they just want to control everything. Okay, so they're going to do it through transportation-oriented development. You're going to manage the risk of people moving from one area to another. You're going to manage the risk that a business might have if its employees drive from Broken Arrow to downtown Tulsa, on all sorts of things like safety, wellness, and so on. When you see the word safe, that just means surveillance. That means that they're going to measure and manage everything. So you'll see when you look in the transportation documents and it talks about safe transport, it just means we're going to have more cameras involved. We're going to have access controls involved so that you have to have enough credits in your social credit account to be able to use the public transportation that you have to use because you don't have a car anymore. Inclusive, this is really a phrase that is used in order to justify measuring all kinds of demographic information. So it's about human capital scoring, and there are moral components to it, but just at a basic technical level, when you have a city that's trying to pursue inclusivity, that means that they have to measure all the demographics that go into some policy or that are affected by some policy. So it's about human capital scoring, and it's a data grab first and foremost. So this is a top-down plan. They say it's bottom-up and it's decentralized. No way. It is top-down and it's end-to-end analysis. So when you're using transportation, you're going to be tracked, traced, measured, managed the whole way. Everything you do. And part of this, it's going to, who's heard of ESG scoring? Probably a lot. Okay, so ESG scoring, in one sentence, it is social credit scoring for corporations. But corporations, in their efforts to raise their ESG scores, are going to measure and manage those three dimensions of ESG, so environmental, social, and governance. If a corporation is managing the environmental part, they're going to be tracking and tracing all of their carbon usage, right? Even indirect carbon usage. your commute time, it factors into indirect carbon emissions that get placed on the company's balance sheet. Commute time is an impact metric. And impact metrics, these are the targets and outcomes that are going to be scored and in the new economy, and people are going to make big bets on whether or not we accomplish those outcomes that are set out in those metrics and in those targets. In the Tulsa plan, the city of Tulsa is going to partner with businesses to incentivize businesses to nudge employees toward using modes of active transport, like bicycling to work and walking, rather than using your car. So you're going to have the power of the city partnering with your employer to tell you that you better either live very close by or you need to hop on a bicycle and go to work that way. Now remember, this is not primarily about stewardship of the environment. The program is actually going to hurt the environment because of all of the electric that goes into it, and it is an economy that runs on data, and that is very intensive in its use of electricity. Okay. All of the new telecom rollout that's going on, 5G. I mean, I use a paper from Ericsson that's a partner of the WEF and is in the UN Global Compact that talks about 6G and emerging cyber physical systems. The new telecom infrastructure is about the surveillance grid, because what does the new economy run on? It runs on data, trading in data. So when you're talking about an economy that runs on tracking and tracing behavioral outcomes, you have to have tons of data picked up through all of the sensors around a smart city to feed into those like impact catalogs that companies are going to have, your government's going to have it, you're going to have your own personal ESG score, and it all runs on data. So it is a surveillance program to measure your behavior and try to make money off of it, and also to manage the risk, because if your transportation sectors are going to be digitalized, and this is drawing on 4IR technologies, and you can see, look at all of your intersections. You have radar, LiDAR, cameras. It's all feeding into this surveillance grid that's being set up. And Tulsa, of course, is a Bloomberg smart city. Bloomberg is all over Tulsa with Bynum and George Kaiser and other foundations. And so, they are really imposing this model without being clear to the people of Tulsa about it. Okay, so smart cities use a variety of software, user interfaces, and communications networks alongside the Internet of Things to deliver connected solutions for the public. IoT, the Internet of Things, is the most important. It is a network of connected devices that communicate and exchange data. And what you're going to see in a smart city are sensors everywhere. Sensors embedded in everything. Your car is going to be able to speak with the traffic signals. You're going to have a digital ID that is able to be picked up by networks of sensors in marketplaces, in grocery stores, wherever you go. If you go to a hospital and receive services, there are going to be networks of sensors that are communicating with who you are, what you do, where you spend your money, who you talk to, and it all goes to this project of social credit scoring. And as we'll see in a minute, the new international economic order is based on ESG and corporate social credit scoring, and those are all linked. So when we talk about who's going to enforce this new economy, really the government is not as dangerous as your employer. And that's another thing that conservatives really have to understand is actually like many of our politicians, elected leaders, they have been brought into a corporate banking and financial agenda, and they're just lending the appearance of legitimacy, of popularly elected legitimacy to these corporate programs. And if you look back in COVID, who was really pushing compliance with these public health mandates? It was it was the private corporations. It was the grocery stores. Okay, so your employer is being measured and managed by, say, their liability risk insurance company, or their investors, and that's why ESG is important. You're not going to get capital unless you can demonstrate these impacts, like you're reducing your carbon footprint and so on. Is transit-oriented development related to 15-minute cities? Yes. So Americans are watching what's happening in the UK and Australia, and they're saying, oh, this would never happen here. Well, it is happening here. But it's coming through this model of transit-oriented development, which sounds like it's based on economic development and jobs, but it's actually about sort of containing people in these 15-minute cities. And it says here on how you implement them. Well, residents can be resistant to TOD. So, go figure, right? So cities should tell them about the benefits. And 15-minute cities are what? Walkable, livable. You have a grocery store right here. It sounds so great. Until you realize that the World Economic Forum is telling you we're going to go to a 15-minute city model. And here's what it looks like. It's 15 minutes from here to here, from here to here, from here. So you will be sort of stuck in a pod. So they have to build a lot of public transportation infrastructure, and they've got to find these innovative, that's a buzzword, ways of financing it. One of those is land value capture, and this is based on, as far as I can tell, a fiction of saying that where they build new transportation hubs is going to result in greater values for your property. And I think the assessors, county assessors, are going to be looking at these things and increasing the tax burden on those properties where these developments occur. And that's going to be captured, that tax revenue is going to be captured later on, and so that later gain is going to be used as a justification for taxing you to build the infrastructure. So it sounds like a circular argument to me, but if you're wondering how some people are going to find their own properties unaffordable, it is through mechanisms like that they're doing lots of tricky stuff with regulations under the banner of innovative financing. So if you know that word innovative, that run from it. It is a buzzword. It means digitalized, and it also means doing things that are contrary to our laws, our procedures. They're doing regulatory changes that voters are not approving of. You have to educate people about what these words mean. It's easier to follow the words than to follow the money. And if we all start talking about this and it becomes something that is just in general conversation, then we all become more confident when we want to contact our representatives. We feel more empowered because when we've been in our day-to-day lives, we've been realizing that we're not the only one who sees this stuff. So I think the conversation has to get loud. And, there are good politicians out there who need to have an excuse to go against the banking cartel. So we have to, I think, I mean, like I say, I've only been doing this for a couple of years, so I could be wrong, but I think that we have to give those good politicians a reason to act that is going to justify them going against the bankers, right? They have to have so much public support or opprobrium behind them that even the bankers are going to know, well, if I force this person to go against this loud majority, it's going to look bad. And our banking cartel, they are all about appearances. You know, and they're very keen on that. So if the public is loud enough that our good elected officials can say, look, I had to do it. Did you hear how loud they were? Look, they were not going to back down. Then I think that that's one effective thing. And then also, part of the new world order plan is to do away with state governments. So you're going to have the Fed, and then you're going to have these large mega cities. And one strategy that I have is pretty simple. I just think, well, whatever they want to do, I would like to do the opposite. So I think if in Oklahoma we can really buttress the power of our state and make it a source of protection of liberties and also sort of figure out how it can support us against our cities, then we will have a model that we can share with the good people of Tennessee, of Florida, of Vermont even, you know, like these different places, and then we can get our Constitution back in check. Because really, I'm of the opinion that our Constitution is a wonderful document, and that right now it's just being executed by criminals. So if we can use you know, the people in our state offices are much closer to us, and we can hold them accountable more easily, but it's going to require all of us making calls, making trips, doing massive PR campaigns, because again, this is about appearances, and our banking cartel likes to work in the shadows. So we have to be very public in standing up against this, and then get some momentum going in Oklahoma, and we can unite with these other states and say, okay, we're gonna, as states, we're gonna get our Constitution back, and we're gonna kick out the criminals. Easy peasy, right? And we pray for a miracle too.
So Julianne Romanello, I am so happy to finally meet you and have an opportunity to interview you. So I just wanted to ask you a few questions. Thank you for your wonderful message today. But your website, Hearts Over Hexagon, I just thought maybe that would be a fun question. If you could tell us a little bit about what is behind that. What's the meaning of Hearts Over Hexagon?
Yeah, you know, it's funny. I would think that that would be obvious, but it's one of those things that isn't obvious to people. So, you know, when I first got into looking at some of the patterns that were involved in this New World Order reset program, I would notice in the branding these hexagons that were everywhere. And I thought, I have never noticed that shape before. And that was one of the first things that made me want to dig in and understand things more. And so I thought, how do you beat these? Well, our hearts, you know, and I was really thinking, I have 4 children, and so, you know, the hearts, like our love, our capacity for love, that is going to beat this technical scientific program that is, you know, it's symbolized by that hexagon.
Yeah, very good. Love that. As a former philosophy professor, what thinkers most influence your perspective on the proper role of government?
Oh, that's a... I'm used to people asking about symbols and you know, existential things about government. Well, you know, I guess I would say probably the biggies. I mean, there's Aristotle, and he talks about the common good and needing to have a reasonable hierarchy and having a strong middle class. So I think that classical influence, it's also based on, you know, on philosophy to some extent, and having these well-reasoned answers to how and why we need to structure things the way we do. But also, you know, I think I learned a lot from Thomas Hobbes about totalitarianism, and I think you read Hobbes and look at what he advocates for, and then you try to do the opposite. And of course, he talks a lot about language. And then, you know, John Locke, and you know, he's one that probably people nowadays would like to criticize and say, well, it's too mainstream, you know, and he places too much of an emphasis on property. But I actually think that he's a bit more sophisticated than that, and that some of those common sense reforms that he argued for, and the natural law foundation of government and consent by the people is very, very important.
Based in your own experience in academia and its corporate subversion, do you suggest that young people go to college, or are there other mechanisms for education that you promote?
Well, you know, I laugh because I tell my 4 children not to plan on college. I would not want them to attend institutions of higher education as they are structured today, and with the values and programs that they are promoting today. So I love the project of learning. I love what I was able to do in the university and the conversations that I was able to have there. But I think we're going to have to rebuild those kinds of places, you know, in this strange new world that we're going toward. And I think you are going to have to learn basic skills, you know, skills that teach us how to do things that we've forgotten how to do.
Does your religious background similarly inform your outlook?
Yes. You know, I mentioned today that one of the first clues that I had that this was a very dark, ugly program was the Fourth Industrial Revolution's explicit statement to the effect of, we are going to confuse or blur the lines between the physical, digital, and biological worlds. So when I'm looking at that, when I'm listening to it, they are trying to confuse people about what's real and what isn't. And as someone who's interested in philosophy, and also someone who I'm a Christian, and I believe that, you know, that the truth will set you free, and Jesus Christ came to set people free, and help them understand what's right and what's wrong, what's real and what isn't. When you have a group that represents the corporate banking cartel telling people that they need to be mixed up in those things, you know, that is a key that this is a very dark program, and that's ultimately why I'd want to fight it.
What tactics have you found most effective in making someone realize the dangers associated with the Fourth Industrial Revolution, especially people who may not be very informed or aware of politics?
Yeah. You know, I try to tie things to a local agenda. So if you look on my Facebook, I always use Tulsa as a model because it is, you know, it is germane to the people who live here, go figure, and they're going to be able to see, here are the names of the people who are doing it, here are the concrete manifestations of the programs that are going on, and, you know, the bike lanes and so on. And I think when you connect to people's real life experiences, that is very powerful. And, you know, then you can also generalize to other cities and people will see the same things there.
Do you think that either political party is capable of effectively resisting the Fourth Industrial Revolution, or is it enough of a catalyst to create a third party or a new political movement?
Yeah.
Good question.
Yeah, I mean, I think both parties are involved in this. I tend to see on the local level that the Republican Party is much more actively involved in trying to understand what's going on and trying to fight it. I think we're going to have to bring in the local progressives and people who identify with the Democratic Party, but it's all going to be at the local level. You know, the top levels of the party are totally corrupted. And I'm a little bit skeptical about a third party only because there are so many efforts to decentralize and to break people into smaller groups that I think if we can preserve those two main parties but really enrich the understanding that their members have at the bottom levels, that to me seems the most promising approach.
As you become a political advocate and waded into the online spectacle, have you felt at all targeted for your activism? I know you're very aware of the risks associated with big data. How do you protect your data?
You know, I've found that if I let Google track my searches, it does some of my work for me. So, I mean, there are ways that I try to lessen my digital footprint, but also I think right now we have to use those tools to the extent that they're effective, and until more people start stepping away from the digital world and until we have some real structures for having reliable paper communication, person-to-person communication, we have to just sort of take one for the team. And I think if I can put myself out there, maybe it will save my kids from having to be out there. And I don't know, I just don't worry about being targeted too much because I feel like I'm doing what I'm supposed to do, and really I feel like God is going to take care of me, you know, and if something happens to me, then you just accept that and know that it was part of it. I hope, you know.
Yeah. So last question, on a similar note, I'm sure as you become active in this digital space, you've come into contact with organizations and personalities that may appear to share your outlook and worldview, but are actually seeking to smear, discredit, or implicate you. Have you learned any techniques in managing your personal reputation and political allegiances?
Yeah. Well, you know, I tend to be a pretty trusting person and pretty open, and you know, even though I look at all of this ugly stuff, I'm generally an optimist about people. So, you know, there have been some professional, if you call this professional, relationships that I got into that I wish I hadn't, and I don't exactly understand how some of those things went awry, but I don't know, what do? You make the best decision at the time. You try to be cautious and get a sense of where people are coming from, and if it doesn't work out, I think I don't want to talk badly about anyone else, and I don't want to try to explain it away. I want to admit that something went wrong and then just go on. And I sort of have faith in people that they're going to figure it out. They'll be able to judge for themselves.
Yeah. None of us are omniscient, obviously. I think we do the best that we can.
We wouldn't be in this mess if we were, right?
Well, Julianne, I just want to say thank you so much for your work. I'm not your biggest fan, but I'm among many. But I greatly appreciate you, and I appreciate your time and for making time for me today here on the DixieCast podcast. So with that, I want to wish you Godspeed and all the blessings to you and your family.
Thank you so much, Jill. It's really an honor to have you all here, and it's my pleasure.
There's a dark and a troubled side of life. There's a bright and a sunny side too, though we meet with the darkness and strife. The sunny side we oh so miss.